Come January 20th, that would be Thursday this week, U.S. President Joe Biden marks his first anniversary in office at the White House. In today's panel discussion, we delve into his efforts over the past 1 year. I have Professor Kim Yoon-wook from the Korean National Diplomatic Academy. Welcome back, Professor Kim.
Thank you.
I also have Professor Im Eun-jung from Koongju National University. It's a pleasure to have you back, Professor Im.
Thank you.
Right, Professor Kim, according to the latest Gallup monthly poll, U.S. President Joe Biden stands just above former President Donald Trump with a 43% approval rating. Now, Mr. Trump's approval rating at 37% was the lowest among the last 7 U.S. leaders. How do you explain that as Mr. Biden's public opinion poll?
I think, at the time when there was general election between Trump and Biden, it was only 2020 that everybody was expecting Trump to be reelected, but COVID came in and things have changed and Biden became a president of the United States. So I think the COVID situation is another factor that lowers the public rate of President Biden. Only 60% of American people are vaccinated. And new variant of COVID is spreading in the United States. So I think people is getting tired of COVID situations. But more important factor I think is inflation situation in the United States. Because of COVID, I think the United States did too much quantitative easing, which made a lot of inflation going on in the United States, and tapering now is too late to catch up with the to deal with the inflation situation. And also maybe lastly the foreign policy issues. Afghanistan withdrawal last summer, that was I think the critical event that made Biden to be unpopular. I mean, withdrawal is fine, but why did you withdraw the US forces from Afghanistan that way? That hampered all the situations as Afghanistan, ruined the reputation of the United States, the international communities, things like that.
Right. And aside from the situation over in Afghanistan, Professor, and President Biden, though, has pledged to restore U.S.'s role in global affairs and has since re-engaged in multilateral initiatives, including the World Health Organization, the Paris Agreement, and so forth. How do you assess his efforts thus far?
Well, his first year, I would say it was somewhat meaningful because, as you just mentioned, especially global issue like climate change, it was, of course, it is a scientific fact, and it is an issue that every single country has to cooperate together. But as we all remember, President Trump did have a different view on the climate change. So climate change like issue, definitely US's leadership, of course, it's not the only factor, but it is a very, very, very important factor to, again, to improve the situation. So in that sense, I will say, again, that his first year was somewhat meaningful. But the thing is, as you just mentioned, Biden during his campaign period, his catchphrase was, again, we're going to restore the soul of America. And the soul of America includes like a democracy, human rights, or those, so-called liberal approach for the those global issue. So, of course, we can agree with the idea, but the thing is, the Biden administration used those so-called the soul of America for targeting some specific challenging countries like China or Russia. So his multilateral approach was partially done, again, with the ally and like-minded countries or some specific countries in the specific regions. So that is why I would say, of course, his first year was meaningful, but the whole accomplishment still remained as just limited. Mm-hmm.
Right. And before we delve into Biden's relationships with China and Russia, Professor Kim, what is your assessment of ties between Seoul and Washington under the Biden administration?
I think Professor Im touched upon this issue a little bit, but I think Biden is trying to make the United States back in international communities, which is different from President Trump. Maybe President Trump is only thinking about how America is about, what is economic situations of the United States is about. But I think Biden wants the United States hegemony back as happened before the Trump began his term, but different ways, because the United States does not have much influence doing everything alone. It needs some help from allies and partners. So that's what Biden is trying to do. He's trying to mobilize all the allies and partners to deal with China issues. But I think there are a lot of questions from allies. I mean, does the U.S. has the same capabilities and power as it used to have? I mean, what kind of public goods can you get from the United States if we are sidelining with the United States to pressure China? So I think that's the fundamental question. And I think more going narrowly, I think U.S. and South Korea have some gaps in threat perceptions now. Before, North Korea threat was the common threat perception we shared, but now the United States want the U.S.-South Korea alliance to be geared more towards pressuring China rather than North Korea. And current Moon Jae-in government thinks that North Korea is not a threat anymore. So I think the two countries is not sharing a very commonized threat perception anymore. I think this is a very important homework that we need to solve in the future.
Do you suppose that perception may change if we have a new administration in power in May?
If the opposition party candidate comes in, I think he will pretty much gear towards more on the U.S. side to deal with China. But I think the ruling party candidate, his foreign policy tendency is pretty much same as Moon Jae-in government, trying to be balanced between U.S. and China. So I think if new government comes in South Korea, I think definitely the alliance sharing threat perception will definitely change.
Right. And staying with bilateral ties, Professor Im, under the Trump administration, there was quite a bit of friction between Seoul and Washington with regard to defense sharing costs and the possible withdrawal of U.S. troops from the Korean Peninsula. Are these issues now no longer concerns under the Biden administration?
Well, any alliance can have any problem all the time. So I won't say, we are completely free from that kind of concern. Anytime, those similar issues can pop up. But probably more, how would you say, serious challenges these days, as just Professor Kim mentioned. Again, the strategic calculations are not exactly identical between the two allies. That's definitely one big thing. And the other thing is, again, America is, again, economic power, as Professor Kim mentioned. It's not really strong or, how would you say, powerful economically as much as, again, it used to be. So now America, especially the Biden administration, is trying to reshore the industries, which means they want to get the industries back to the United States. So they will be very much interested in economic benefit or investment from its partner countries, like, of course, Korea. So if we recall the summit between the two presidents in May last year, again, President Moon, his delegation was full of all this, entrepreneurs and big conglomerates, CEOs. So they committed huge investment to the United States, which was a really big thing. So again, any problem can pop up, but probably interesting issue will be economy-related things, I think. Mm-hmm.
Right. And moving on to broader regional issues, Professor Kim, what are your thoughts on the Biden administration's efforts to engage North Korea? You have mentioned that the focus appears to be more on China, but thus far, despite Pyongyang's recent missile testings, the U.S. has spoken about the need for dialogue without any conditions. What are your thoughts on their efforts?
I think the basic direction is correct. I mean, the U.S. definitely needs to and wants to open a working level talk with Kim Jong-un, which has been the U.S. posture before. I mean, Trump government had a direct talk with Kim Jong-un, which is top-down approach, but that is very exceptional from the U.S. perspective. I think, in order to make things solved thoroughly, I think there needs to be a working level talk between two countries. Then if there comes up some rough and detailed agreement, I think the president would shake hands and sign the agreement. So I think that was the direction. But I think Kim Jong-un is not ready for working level talk. I mean, the previous lesson we can think about is the six-party process, in which six parties came together with the goal of verify of denuclearization of North Korea. But North Korea stepped out of the multilateral talk when there were talks about, what kinds of nuclear programs and weapons you have. You need to report everything, and also let's talk about what kinds of procedure would be there to verify the nuclear program in North Korea. So I think North Korea does not want to go into that level. I don't think they are ready for working level talk. So I think it's not the problem of Biden government, but I think it is the problem of Kim Jong-un. Maybe Kim Jong-un does not want to go into specific procedure to denuclearize itself. More roughly, I think maybe Kim Jong-un is not ready to denuclearize itself. So I think this is very big problem in the Korean Peninsula, which I don't think will be solvable whatever government in the United States comes in.
Right. And staying with that, it's been less than 3 weeks since the start of this new year, 2022, Professor Im, and already North Korea has conducted several missile testings. Having said that, do you foresee a resumption in talks between Pyongyang and Washington in the near future?
Well, I cannot be that optimistic, to be very honest. All this delivery system has shown some improvements technologically, which means, again, the cost, right? The cost for the resuming the negotiations goes up too. So as the burden for the government, and not only for the Washington, for our government too, is increasing. So in that sense, I cannot be very optimistic about a possibility of resuming the dialogue soon. And another, just in timing-wise, again, our government, the term is ending, and we are also, waiting for the big event, again, the presidential election. What's only like a 1.5 month left. So, well, I will say, it'll be very difficult to have another round of the talks with this incumbent partners.
Right. Professor Kim, what are the prospects of the Biden administration signing perhaps an end-of-war declaration here for the Korean Peninsula amid North Korea's nuclear ambitions?
I think it's not the problem of Biden government, but it's Kim Jong-un, whether it's going to be signed or not. I think, South Korea and the United States have agreed upon the contents of end-of-war statement. I mean, the contents would not be something that North Korea has requested, which are like sanctions should be relieved, and also the U.S.-South Korea joint military exercises should be canceled, things like that. But I think from the U.S. perspective, U.S. forces in Korea is very important asset to deal with North Korean threats. And maybe, the United States very keen about the end-of-war statement to be something legal so that it will have an impact on the United Nations command future. But I think even though that will be the U.S. posture, I think U.S. and South Korea, I think have agreed upon what kinds of content would be there in the end-of-war statement. But I think the problem is Kim Jong-un. I don't think Kim Jong-un would accept that. I mean, new government would come in South Korea sooner or later. And if there is no sanction lift, the current North Korean dire economic situation would not easily solved throughout the end-of-war statement. I mean, that would just probably be something that makes the U.S. and South Korea to come up to a mutual disarmament talk rather than just focusing on North Korea to be denuclearized. But that itself is also not easy. by end-war statement. So I think Kim Jong-un perspective, end-war statement without all those contents would not be something that would be beneficial for Kim Jong-un's North Korea.
Right, I see. Professor Im, come Friday, President Biden and his Japanese counterpart Fumio Kishida will hold virtual talks. Now, pundits claim the two leaders will probably touch upon North Korea's latest displays of defiance. Do you agree?
Yes, I think so. And but probably bigger issue between Washington and Tokyo is obviously the maritime security issue, especially in the South China Sea, East China Sea. Free and open Indo-Pacific, vision, strategy, whatever you call. It was an idea actually suggested by Tokyo, if we recall the past years. So, well, Japan is trying to use these situations, again, the China-U.S. Strategic rivalry, all this, maritime security realignment is definitely, I would say, the top priority of Tokyo. Having had that top priority, of course, North Korea has all this, technological improvement in terms of delivery system. That's definitely does provide a good reason for Tokyo to be, how would you say, more defensive for themselves, or to more aggressive or even offensive to the Pyongyang. Well, so I would say again, they will definitely discuss on the North Korea related issue along with the FOIP.
Right. Professor Kim, tensions between the Biden administration, as Professor Im has mentioned, between countries like China and Russia remain quite high. What are the implications of this reality on perhaps the US's hopes to reassert its role in the global arena?
Yes, the Biden government made it clear that the threats, major threats, are Russia and China, and they're doing measures to deal with those two superpowers. But I think, paradoxically, the new government's national security strategies and most recent national defense strategies, which came out at the end of Biden-Trump government, specifies that the U.S. is only allowed and capable of waging only one warfare in the world simultaneously. So maybe if something happens with Russia and China together, the U.S. would not be able to deal with those two superpowers, two warfares. I mean, that's why I think this is a little bit disappointing to allies. But what the U.S. is announcing as its messages in case of the Russia and Croatia and the Ukraine issue is that if Russia invades Ukraine, U.S. and NATO members would pose huge sanctions on Russia. But that's it. The U.S. doesn't say that it will go in there to fight for Ukraine against Russia. There's no messages like that. So I think these kinds of messages of the United States is, I think, giving very bad signals to allies and partners, maybe also Taiwan people, Taiwan government. So definitely Russia and China is getting together to deal with the United States, which is no good for the United States. Rather than focusing on China, it has to deal with two countries at the same time. So strategically, dealing with two superpowers and dealing with the allies and partners, I think this is a very big quagmire that faces the United States for now.
Right, and keeping in mind what Professor Kim has just said, Professor Im, I ask you the difficult question then. What is your outlook with regard to the Biden administration's future course of action amid these challenges?
Well, yeah, again, the U.S.-China rivalry, the strategic rivalry competition, it is very multidimensional. It is not only about maritime security or military capability, because now we are living in the era of fourth industrial revolution. All this tech competition is getting more and more increasingly intense, and from U.S.'s point of view, it cannot be it cannot be a taker of whatever those rules made by somebody else. So U.S. definitely wants to remain as a rule maker and they want to provide a standard, a new market. So, but the thing is, as we just discussed, U.S.'s power, economic power, is not really that level. That is why they're trying to, how would you say, to strengthen the partnership with the like-minded countries. And Russia is another. So, but, if you think about all this U.S.'s current capability and how just a wide strategic competition-related spectrum, again, I'll say U.S. will keep emphasizing the partnership with the like-minded countries. That might be their strategy and the tactics and then approaches that will keep taking.
I see. All right, Professor Im, as always, thank you very much for your insight today. Professor Kim, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts.
Thank you.